In life, her service had been impeccable. Daily did she devote herself to the Lady of Loss. Daily did she free herself from the tyranny of memory. All in time was lost to her, her relations, her preferences, even her own name. Upon the altar of her devotion placed she the ultimate offering, her emptied mind. And when she died, when she awoke in death and found herself standing in the pale and faded city of Judgement, she waited for the Lady of Loss to retrieve her. A million souls and more passed her in colorless gusts, but no hand materialized in her hand. No voice whispered instruction in her ear. No guidance preferred itself from the bleached and barren sky. Time, immaterial time, passed around her like air, coming and going. And still, the goddess did not come for her devotee. Kelemvor pitied her, as much as the Lord of the Dead is able, but could not intervene. This cleric of the Lady of Loss, unclaimed despite her worthiness, might yet have one more lesson to learn, that not of forgetting, but being forgotten. Welcome back to the 5th video in this Sunday lore series, bringing us all the way up to the launch of Baldur's Gate 3. Before we get started, I do want to quickly note that we have a very, very special guest that will be joining us in one of these next few lore videos, so keep an eye out for that. In today's video, we're going to be talking about death. As you will see, quite a lot of death in Baldur's Gate 3. Death in the Forgotten Realms can be a fairly confusing topic, and the departure of one's soul from their physical body many times is just the beginning. Now, that excerpt that I read to you in the intro to this video is actually from a book that you can find in Baldur's Gate 3 called The Unclaimed, and as we get through this video, it should start to make much more sense. I do want to preface this video, though, with a quick discussion on resurrection scrolls and spells. Scrolls and spells of this nature are oftentimes used quite liberally in video games, and this is done for obvious logistical and player enjoyment reasons. In Baldur's Gate 3, many of you will have a character or multiple characters in your party that will eventually gain access to spells such as Revivify, and on top of that, there will likely be an ample supply of resurrection scrolls that can be found and bought. For the most part, you and your party will never permanently die, as even with a total party wipe, you're simply forced to load your most recent save file and carry on like it never happened. Now, there of course will likely be certain story elements that may allow for companion death, but generally speaking, you and your party have an unmatched power of resurrection. In Forgotten Realms books and lore, death tends to be a much more serious matter, where these resurrection scrolls and spells may be extremely rare and costly, or only able to be used by very specially gifted characters, or perhaps only by the gods themselves. This is also shown to be the case in Baldur's Gate 3 for the world outside of your chosen party. If an important NPC story character dies, they are likely going to actually be dead. You won't be able to use one of your many resurrection scrolls on them. Their death will have a real impact on the story. Now, the lore behind death and what it means in the Forgotten Realms is quite important to know if one is seeking a deeper understanding of Baldur's Gate 3 and Forgotten Realms lore. When one dies in the Forgotten Realms, according to the 5th edition Dungeons Master's Guide, their soul departs their body, travels through the astral plane, and then goes to abide on a plane of that creature's chosen deity. There's a bit more to it than just that, though, and Larian Studios has shown with BG3 that their in-game lore will also go a bit deeper. If you watched my recent video on the planes of existence, you would know that the astral plane encircles the entirety of the Great Wheel, and in theory it connects the material plane to the outer planes of existence. Within the astral plane lies a neutral demi-plane known as the Fugue plane, and this is actually where souls are drawn to. The Fugue plane is described as flat, gray, bland, and nondescript, with its only significant feature being that of the City of Judgement. The City of Judgement is currently ruled over by Kelemvor, the Lord of the Dead, the Judge of the Damned. The former Lords of the Dead, Jurgle, Myrkul, and Sirik, not to be confused with the Dead Three, although Myrkul is part of the Dead Three, ruled from the Bone Tower in the city during their respective times of power. But Kelemvor wished to clear all the corruptions in the realms of death brought by these former Lords of Death, and he would end up reshaping this Bone Tower into the Crystal Spire. This was done to represent that death should not be something to be feared. Kelemvor's job as the Lord of the Dead and Judge of the Damned was to judge the souls of those that were a bit more ambiguous in their nature, or perhaps even faithless. Faithful souls, those that did well in their worship of one of the gods in their previous physical lives, would end up being claimed by servitors from their respective deity, and their souls were eventually brought to the plane of existence that said deity resides on. For example, if you were a good worshipper of Myrkul, the neutral good goddess of forests and forest creatures, Myrkul, or her faithful servants should I say, would claim your soul from the city of Judgement, and you would spend your afterlife in the outer plane known as the Beastlands. Those that were polytheistic in nature, which was very common, would oftentimes be claimed by the deity that they showed the most favor to. In the excerpt that I read to you from the Unclaimed book in Baldur's Gate 3, you have an individual that worshipped the Lady of Loss, Shar, but was ultimately forgotten. Kelemvor, although he does show signs of having empathy for creatures, takes his job quite seriously, and he could not intervene and send her soul off to be claimed by Shar. The souls that arrive at the City of Judgment that are faithless, unclaimed, or even false were judged by Kelemvor, who decides the fate of each one of them. Some of these souls may be charged with working in the City of Judgment and doing jobs such as serving as guides to other lost souls, while others may be transformed into squirming larvae and cast into the dust. The truly false and faithless were actually mortared into the wall of the Faithless, which was created by Myrkul during his time of rule. And in this wall, souls slowly dissolve to begin to become part of the stuff of the wall itself. The wall of the Faithless is said to encircle the entirety of the city, and it's held together by a supernatural greenish mold. Kelemvor, in his earlier ruling days, actually struck down the wall, as he thought it was too harsh of a punishment, and he sought more of a fair treatment for the faithless. Although not long after, other gods accused Kelemvor of acting like a mortal, and taking things far too personally, and this led Kelemvor to putting the wall back up. This may make the idea of playing as a faithless character less appealing, but let's further expand on what the meaning of faithless may actually be. Ed Greenwood, the creator of the Forgotten Realms, responded to a tweet in the past asking him, "I'd really like to make a Buddhist-like monk character. The believers of the Source Creed fits him perfectly for my next Forgotten Realms game, but I don't want to have him go to the Wall of the Faithless in case he'd die. How could I solve this conundrum?" Ed responded, "It's no conundrum. Some D&D players seem to find it very difficult to move from monotheistic thinking, there's only one true god, to pantheistic, as all sentience in the realms believe equals there are many gods, all are real, and all should be venerated or respected. So assuming your monk grew up in the realms and thinks or believes like anyone native to Toril, that monk would believe in all of the gods, and would make offerings or reverence to them all, even if only to ward away displeasure. For example, prayers to Umberlee if going on an ocean voyage, prayers to Shandakol if embarking on a journey into unfamiliar wilderlands, or joining a caravan or going prospecting, and so on. These small acts mean that the monk is not faithless and will not go to the wall. Faithless does not mean not sufficiently attentive to just one deity and not being loyal to that god above all others. All believers of the Source believe that gods exist and that becoming one is a desirable goal, so they cannot, by definition, be faithless. The existence of the gods in the Forgotten Realms is much more apparent and clear-cut than the world we live in outside of our video games and our fantasy world, so having a base view that the gods exist isn't really a controversial subject for Forgotten Realms citizens. Therefore, being someone that denies the existence of the gods, someone who is truly faithless, is much less common. Moving on, also on the Fugue plane are devils known as Batezu, and they have an agreement with Kelemvor that they cannot trick or harm the souls in the City of Judgment that are waiting to be collected by their deities, but they can try to bargain with them. These devils want souls so they can use them to create lemures, which are the lowest form of a devil, but over time they can evolve. This isn't appealing to most souls, as most would prefer to be with their deity. But for those who are pledged to an evil deity, or those that fear some sort of soul punishment coming their way, this can be a tempting offer. In relation to BG3 specifically, you may even find yourself in a situation where a devil approaches you and tries to bargain for your soul well before you have even died or gone to the Fugue plane. The outer lower plane of the 9 hells, specifically its uppermost layer of Avernus, which BG3's tutorial starts us off in, also uses a currency called soul coins. And a soul coin is a coin that is infused with the soul of a single creature. These coins are particularly valuable in Avernus because they can be used to power war machinery for the ongoing Blood War, which is an eternal war between devils and demons, but more on that in a future video. On the opposite end of devils, souls that are claimed by servitors from the upper planes may have a pathway to becoming a celestial, such as an angel. Angels are created by the will of their deities from the spirits of select petitioners, and a petitioner is simply another word for a soul that made it to another plane of existence outside of the material plane. Although a lot of this outer planes discussion and souls is still left to our imagination in Dungeons & Dragons as to what exactly the afterlife truly is, you can see that the subject matter is a bit more complex than simply being sent to heaven or hell, or simply ceasing to exist. And the last thing I want to touch on in this video is one of the Dead 3 members, Myrkul, as this video may have confused you a bit, as many know of Myrkul as the Lord of the Dead. Now, Myrkul did have control of the city of Judgement in the past when the Dead 3 made their rise to divinity when Jurgle gave up his portfolios to them. I did cover this in a previous lore video. Myrkul held the same portfolio that Kelemvor holds right now in modern-day Forgotten Realms, albeit Myrkul was much more about making death a fearful event, as he loved to torture souls and throw them into the wall of the Faithless, while Kelemvor tends to be much more neutral in his judgments. Myrkul, along with Bane and Baal, were killed during the Time of Troubles, and although all 3 of them have returned, they are said to be quasi-deities now in modern-day Forgotten Realms. You may still hear Myrkul referred to at times as the god of the dead or death, as he still is in many ways a god of death, but he is not the actual lord of the dead that judges souls like Kelemvor does. In fact, when Myrkul was resurrected, he actually worked for Kelemvor and possibly even still does, despite Kelemvor despising Myrkul because Myrkul likes to create lots of undead, which is not exactly part of the natural process of death. The easiest way to separate the two is by referring to Myrkul as the Lord of Bones or the God of Decay, or perhaps even the Reaper. And that'll be it for this Sunday's lore video. Thank you so much to all of you that make it all the way to the end of the video, and special thank you to channel members and patrons who help keep series like this alive. Also, a friendly reminder that we have a very special guest that will be visiting the channel within the next video or two, so make sure to keep an eye out for that, and I'll catch you on the next one.